It was a regular Friday afternoon at Jefferson City's busy downtown area. The streets were alive with the usual hum of cars, pedestrians hurrying to wrap up their day, and shopkeepers calling out to potential customers. Amidst the urban hustle, Officer Daniel Hayes, a 6-year veteran of the local police force, sat in his patrol car parked near a popular coffee shop, scanning the crowd for anything suspicious. He prided himself on being sharp, always ready to assert his authority when needed. Today, he felt particularly confident, his badge gleaming under the afternoon sun. Just as he took a sip from his lukewarm coffee, something caught his eye. A tall black man in a tailored navy blue suit stepping out of a luxury black SUV parked near a no parking sign. The man adjusted his tie, glanced at his watch, and walked briskly toward the coffee shop. His confident stride seemed almost deliberate, like he owned the place. That irritated Officer Hayes. "Who does he think he is?" Hayes muttered under his breath, already reaching for his ticket pad. He hated it when people acted like rules didn't apply to them, especially in his district. As he approached the SUV, he noticed the car's spotless finish, high-end rims, and government plates. But instead of pausing, he saw it as further justification, another wealthy guy thinking he was above the law. Without a second thought, Hayes pulled out his ticket book and began writing furiously. He even snapped a few pictures of the vehicle, making sure to document every angle for evidence. He was determined to make this encounter count. This wasn't just about enforcing the law. It felt personal now. Moments later, the well-dressed man exited the coffee shop, holding a small paper bag and a coffee cup. His eyes briefly met Officer Hayes's as he approached his SUV. There was no anger, no defensiveness, just calm curiosity. "Is there a problem, officer?" the man asked, his voice steady and polite. "License and registration," Hayes snapped, his tone sharp and commanding. "You're parked illegally, and I need to see your ID now." The man raised an eyebrow, but remained composed. "I'm not sure this is necessary." "Necessary?" Hayes interrupted, stepping closer with unmistakable authority. "Maybe if you followed the law like everyone else, we wouldn't be having this conversation." A tense silence settled between them. People passing by slowed down, sensing that something was unfolding, though no one dared to interfere. The air felt charged with unspoken tension. The man sighed quietly and reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out his leather wallet. As he flipped it open, Hayes' eyes locked onto the shiny gold badge inside, marked with the unmistakable words, **** Chief of Police, Jefferson City. ***. In that moment, Hayes' heart stopped. Beads of sweat formed on his forehead, and his breath hitched. The realization hit him like a freight train. He hadn't just disrespected any man. He had just humiliated ***, his boss ***. For a moment, Officer Hayes stood frozen, staring at the badge as if his eyes were playing tricks on him. His mind raced through the last few minutes. His harsh tone, the accusations, the blatant disrespect. He swallowed hard, feeling the crushing weight of his mistakes settling over him like a heavy fog. The man, Chief Michael Carter ***, as his badge confirmed, calmly slipped his wallet back into his pocket. His face remained unreadable, almost too composed, which only made Hayes more nervous. He expected anger, outrage, maybe even a scolding right there on the street. Instead, Chief Carter simply adjusted his jacket, as if nothing significant had happened. "Is this your vehicle, sir?" Hayes stammered, already knowing the answer. His voice cracked slightly, his earlier bravado gone. Chief Carter tilted his head slightly. "It is. I assume you've already written the ticket." Hayes hesitated, still clutching the citation in his hand. His fingers trembled as he tried to think of a way out. A way to undo what he'd done. Maybe he could tear up the ticket and apologize profusely. But deep down, he knew it wouldn't change anything. The damage was done. Yes, sir," he admitted reluctantly, lowering his gaze to avoid the piercing stare he felt coming from Chief Carter. "Good," the chief replied evenly, his tone offering no hint of emotion. Always enforce the law regardless of who it is. Hayes blinked, stunned by the response. This wasn't how he thought the encounter would play out. No shouting, no threats about his career, just calm acceptance. But that only made him feel worse. He had expected resistance, maybe even some arrogance. Instead, Chief Carter had shown nothing but restraint and professionalism. Two things Hayes realized he completely lacked. Before Hayes could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps drew both men's attention. Officer Martinez, Hayes' partner, jogged up from the patrol car, clearly unaware of the situation unfolding. "Everything good here?" Martinez asked casually, giving Chief Carter a quick once-over, likely assuming he was just another civilian. Hayes opened his mouth, struggling to form words, but Chief Carter spoke first. "Everything's fine," he said smoothly. Officer Hayes was just finishing up. Martinez raised an eyebrow, but didn't press further. He glanced at Hayes, silently asking if he needed backup. But Hayes shook his head slightly, still too stunned to speak. As Martinez turned and walked back toward the patrol car, Hayes felt a fresh wave of panic. His career could be over, and there was nothing he could do to fix it. "I didn't realize." Hayes started, but Chief Carter held up a hand, cutting him off, not out of anger, but with quiet authority. "Officer Hayes," Chief Carter said calmly, "it's not about realizing who someone is. It's about how you treat people. Asterisk all asterisk people." The words hit Hayes harder than any formal reprimand could have. He felt exposed, his earlier arrogance now replaced by deep regret. He had acted out of bias, assuming the worst based on appearance alone, never considering that the man he was targeting could be someone of great significance, or simply someone deserving of respect. Before Hayes could respond, Chief Carter reached into his pocket again, not for his badge this time, but for a business card. He handed it over without another word. "Report to my office first thing Monday morning," he instructed, his tone still professional, but unmistakably firm. "We'll discuss this further." Hayes nodded, barely managing a whispered, "Yes, sir." Without another glance, Chief Carter stepped into his SUV, started the engine, and drove off, leaving Hayes standing there, still clutching the business card as if it were a lifeline or a sentence. For the first time in his career, Hayes felt completely powerless. This wasn't just about a parking ticket. It was about something much bigger. As he slowly walked back to his patrol car, he couldn't shake the sinking feeling that his life was about to change forever. And for the first time in a long time. He wasn't sure if it would be for better or worse. The weekend passed in a blur for Officer Hayes. Sleep was scarce, his mind replaying the humiliating encounter with Chief Carter over and over again. Every detail felt magnified, the tone of his voice, the way he'd puffed out his chest, the smug satisfaction he felt while writing that ticket. Now, all he could feel was dread. By Sunday night, Hayes found himself sitting alone in his dimly lit apartment, nursing a cup of cold coffee. The chief's business card lay on the table, mocking him with its stark, professional print. He had spent hours obsessing over what might happen next. Would he be suspended? Demoted? Fired? His career, his entire identity, was on the line, and he had no one to blame but himself. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, Chief Michael Carter sat in his home office, reviewing files under the soft glow of a desk lamp. His face remained unreadable, as it often did, but there was a subtle wariness in his eyes. He had dealt with officers like Hayes before, overzealous, quick to judge, and even quicker to flex their authority. Some could be trained, molded into better officers. Others couldn't. He thought back to the incident outside the coffee shop. He had seen the instant shift in Hayes' demeanor the moment he revealed his badge. The sudden respect, the panic, it was a reaction he knew all too well. But respect should never be tied to rank or status. It should be rooted in basic human decency, something far too many people seem to forget. Monday morning arrived far too soon for Hayes. His uniform felt heavier than usual as he adjusted his belt and badge, his hands trembling slightly. The drive to the station was quiet, the usual morning radio chatter replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. At precisely 8 o'clock a.m., Hayes stood outside Chief Carter's office door, staring at the frosted glass with the bold lettering that read *** Michael Carter, Chief of Police. ***, he took a shaky breath and knocked twice, his knuckles grazing the cool surface. "Come in," came the firm but calm voice from inside. Hayes stepped in, his eyes immediately drawn to Chief Carter, who sat behind a large oak desk, meticulously organized and imposing. The chief's expression was unreadable as he gestured toward the chair in front of him. "Officer Hayes," he greeted, his tone measured but serious. "Take a seat." Hayes obeyed, sitting stiffly at the edge of the chair, his hands resting uneasily on his knees. His mouth felt dry, words tangled in his throat. "You know why you're here," Chief Carter began, folding his hands on the desk. "Before you say anything, I want to hear your side of what happened on Friday." Hayes hesitated, gathering his thoughts. He knew there was no point in lying or making excuses. The chief had lived through the entire ordeal firsthand. "Sir, I messed up," Hayes admitted, his voice strained. "I saw a car parked in a restricted zone, and I assumed the worst. I didn't treat you with the respect you deserved, or anyone else for that matter." Chief Carter studied him carefully, his sharp eyes searching for signs of sincerity. Hayes continued, his voice thick with regret. "I let my assumptions get the better of me," he confessed. "I was wrong." Silence filled the room, heavy and oppressive. For a moment, Hayes thought the chief might explode with anger or deliver a harsh reprimand. But instead, Chief Carter leaned back in his chair, his expression softening, just slightly. "I'm not interested in apologies, Officer Hayes," he said quietly. "I'm interested in what you're going to do about it." Hayes blinked, caught off guard. He had expected lectures, disciplinary threats. Anything but this. "You've been on the force for 6 years," Chief Carter continued, his tone unwavering. "Long enough to know that policing isn't just about writing tickets or making arrests. It's about judgment, integrity, and how you treat the people you serve." Hayes nodded slowly, feeling the weight of those words settle over him. "Have you ever considered why you reacted the way you did?" Chief Carter pressed, his gaze piercing. "Why you jumped to conclusions before you even spoke to me?" The question lingered, uncomfortable and unavoidable. Hayes shifted in his seat, knowing exactly what the chief meant, but struggling to admit it. "I guess I was used to certain expectations," Hayes said carefully, his voice barely above a whisper. "Certain assumptions." Chief Carter let the words hang in the air, neither confirming nor denying them. Instead, he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thin folder, sliding it across the desk toward Hayes. "Consider this your second chance," he said firmly. "Mandatory community relations training starts tomorrow. You'll also be shadowing me personally for the next 6 weeks." Hayes stared at the folder, stunned. Shadowing the chief himself. It felt more like a punishment disguised as an opportunity, but he knew better than to argue. "Thank you, sir," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. Chief Carter nodded, signaling that the meeting was over. As Hayes rose to leave, he paused at the door, glancing back. "Chief, why are you giving me another chance?" he asked cautiously. For the first time, Chief Carter allowed a faint, knowing smile to touch the corners of his mouth. "Because someone gave me on once," he said simply. Hayes nodded slowly, the gravity of those words sinking in. As he stepped out into the bustling station hallway, he realized that his career, and perhaps his entire perspective, was about to change in ways he could never have anticipated. The real test was only just beginning. The following weeks were nothing short of grueling for Officer Hayes. Shadowing Chief Carter was unlike anything he had expected. It wasn't just about riding alone in the SUV or observing the chief's decisions. It was a complete dismantling of everything Hayes thought he knew about policing. Their first assignment together was a community outreach event in one of the city's tougher neighborhoods, a place Hayes had avoided unless responding to a call. The streets were lined with worn-out buildings, graffiti-stained walls, and faded shop signs barely hanging on. To Hayes, this part of town had always been synonymous with trouble. As they stepped out of the SUV, Hayes instinctively scanned the area, his hand brushing against his holstered weapon. Chief Carter noticed but said nothing. Instead, he greeted several locals by name, shaking hands and exchanging warm smiles. Hayes watched in disbelief as people responded to the chief with genuine respect, not out of fear, but because they trusted him. "Stick close," Chief Carter instructed, leading him toward a small community center buzzing with activity. Kids played basketball on a cracked court, while volunteers handed out hot meals and supplies. Hayes felt out of place, his rigid posture contrasting sharply with the chief's relaxed ease. Inside, the air was filled with the scent of home-cooked food and the sound of lively conversations. Chief Carter introduced Hayes to several community leaders, each interaction peeling back another layer of the chief's deep connection to the neighborhood. He wasn't just a police chief, he was part of the fabric of the community. But the tension simmering within Hayes refused to dissipate. He couldn't shake the unease that came from being in unfamiliar territory, surrounded by faces he had long associated with danger. His instincts remained on high alert, making every interaction feel like a test. As the afternoon wore on, Hayes noticed a young boy, no older than 10, sitting alone on the steps outside, nervously twirling a basketball in his hands. His clothes were worn, and his expression was distant, almost guarded. "Something on your mind, Hayes?" Chief Carter's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Just noticing that kid over there," Hayes admitted, nodding toward the boy. Chief Carter followed his gaze and sighed quietly. "That's Jordan. His father's doing time, drug charges. His mother works 2 jobs just to keep food on the table." Hayes shifted uncomfortably. Does he get into trouble?" "Not yet," the chief replied thoughtfully. "But in neighborhoods like this, trouble has a way of finding kids like him." The weight of those words hit Hayes harder than he expected. Suddenly, Jordan wasn't just a statistic or a face in a police file. He was a kid on the edge of being lost to a system Hayes had only ever seen from one side. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted from the far end of the street. Raised voices echoed through the air, followed by the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. Hayes tensed immediately, his hand instinctively moving to his holster. "Stay with me," Chief Carter ordered sharply, already moving toward the source of the disturbance. They rounded the corner and spotted a heated argument outside a small convenience store. 2 men were squared off, their voices rising as a crowd began to gather. The store's front window was shattered, shards of glass glittering on the pavement. Without hesitation, Chief Carter stepped between the men, raising his hands in a commanding but calm gesture. "All right, let's break this up," he called firmly. "We're not doing this today." The men hesitated, their aggression momentarily tempered by the chief's authoritative presence. Hayes flanked the chief, his hand still resting on his weapon, ready for anything. "What's going on here?" Chief Carter demanded, keeping his tone steady but firm. One of the men, tall and wiry with a face lined by years of hardship, jabbed a finger toward the other. "This fool owes me money. He thinks he can just walk away without paying." The other man, younger but equally hardened, clenched his fists. "I told you I'm working on it. You busting up my shop ain't gonna fix anything." The air crackled with tension, the situation balanced on a razor's edge. Hayes could see the anger in their eyes, desperation simmering beneath the surface. He knew how quickly things could spiral out of control. Before either man could make a move, Chief Carter took a decisive step forward. "This isn't the way," he said, his voice low but commanding. "You want to talk, we'll talk. But breaking windows and making threats won't solve anything." For a moment, it seemed like his words might land, but then, from the edge of the crowd, a voice shouted, "Cops always taking sides. They don't care about us." The crowd stirred, murmurs of resentment rippling through the onlookers. Hayes' pulse quickened, his eyes darting between the faces in the growing crowd. He could feel the mood shifting. Anger, frustration, years of pent-up distrust boiling to the surface. Chief Carter held his ground, refusing to be rattled. "I'm here because I do care," he said firmly, locking eyes with the men. "But you have to meet me halfway." The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with uncertainty. The men exchanged tense glances, still caught between anger and reason. The crowd pressed in closer, their collective frustration palpable, teetering on the brink of chaos. Hayes's breath hitched as his grip tightened on his belt. His heart pounded in his chest, knowing that one wrong move, one misplaced word, could ignite the situation in an instant. He glanced at Chief Carter, whose unwavering calm seemed almost impossible in the face of such raw tension. And then, just when it seemed like the moment might break, something happened that neither Hayes nor the chief could have predicted. Before anyone could react, the sound of screeching tires pierced the tense silence. A black sedan, windows tinted dark, skidded around the corner and came to a jarring stop just feet from the gathered crowd. The car's engine idled loudly, a low, menacing growl that set everyone on edge. Chief Carter's eyes narrowed, instantly alert. Hayes' hand dropped instinctively to his weapon, adrenaline surging through his veins. The already uneasy crowd shifted, murmurs of confusion spreading as they cautiously backed away from the car. For a moment, everything seemed frozen in time. Then the back door of the sedan swung open, and out stepped a man Hayes immediately recognized, Dante D. Lawson, a notorious figure known throughout the city for running an illegal gambling ring and suspected ties to violent crimes. He was sharp-dressed in a tailored suit, his signature gold chain gleaming under the harsh streetlight. His presence alone was enough to turn the already tense atmosphere electric. Lawson surveyed the scene with a slow, calculating gaze, his expression unreadable. His reputation was built on control of people, of situations, of entire neighborhoods. Wherever he showed up, trouble usually followed. Well, looks like I walked into a little block party," Lawson said smoothly, his voice dripping with dangerous charm. He took a slow step forward, hands casually tucked into his pockets. "Chief Carter, long time no see." Chief Carter didn't flinch. His posture remained steady, though Hayes could see the flicker of recognition and caution in his eyes. Lawson, the chief, greeted coldly. "This is official police business. You should leave." Lawson chuckled, the sound cold and calculated. "Come on now, Chief. No need to be hostile. I'm just here, making sure my community is being treated fairly." His gaze shifted toward the two men who had been arguing moments earlier. "Seems like there's been some misunderstanding." The men exchanged nervous glances but stayed silent, clearly aware of what Lawson's presence meant. The crowd, now pushed back to the edges of the street, watched with wary anticipation. The entire block felt like a live wire ready to snap. Hayes' pulse pounded in his ears. He'd heard stories about Lawson's influence, how he ruled parts of the city through fear and manipulation, slipping through legal cracks every time the police tried to nail him. But seeing him here, boldly inserting himself into a volatile situation, made the danger feel far more immediate. "You have no business here," Chief Carter warned, his voice low but firm. "Walk away." But Lawson only smiled wider. "See, that's where you're wrong, Chief. I've always had business here. This is my neighborhood. You just play cop in it." The threat in his words was unmistakable. Hayes could feel the chief weighing his next move carefully. They were outnumbered, surrounded by a crowd teetering on the edge of trust and rebellion. And now, with Lawson in the mix, any attempt to de-escalate felt like walking a razor-thin line. Before Chief Carter could respond, Lawson took another deliberate step forward, locking eyes with him. "Tell you what," he offered smoothly. "Why don't you let these boys settle their differences, without you playing referee? Save yourself the trouble." Chief Carter held his gaze, refusing to back down. "This isn't about settling scores. It's about doing what's right." Lawson's expression hardened, the charm slipping just enough to reveal the ruthless man beneath. What's asterisk right asterisk is whatever I say it is, he hissed, his voice cold and dangerous. The street fell into a deadly silence, tension hanging thick in the air. Hayes' grip on his holster tightened, ready for the worst, but fully aware that drawing his weapon could ignite the very chaos they were trying to prevent. Then from the edge of the crowd, a voice called out, small but clear. "Leave him alone." Every head turned. Standing just a few feet away was Jordan, the young boy from the community center, his hands balled into fists, his face set with fierce determination. Hayes' breath hitched. The sight of the boy standing defiantly in the face of danger sent a surge of protectiveness through him, but also a sickening sense of dread. Lawson's eyes darkened, locking onto the boy with slow, deliberate menace. "You got something to say, kid," he sneered. Jordan didn't back down. "You don't own this place. You just make things worse." The crowd stirred uneasily, some silently willing Jordan to back away, others moved by his unexpected bravery. Hayes took a step forward, ready to intervene, but Chief Carter subtly held him back with a raised hand. His eyes remained locked on Lawson, carefully reading every move. For a moment, it seemed like Lawson might lash out, deliver a brutal, public lesson in dominance. But then something shifted in his expression. A flicker of recognition, maybe even respect, masked behind cold calculation. "Brave kid," Lawson muttered, almost to himself. He straightened his jacket with deliberate precision, letting the moment stretch unbearably long before turning back to Chief Carter. "You're lucky, this time." With that, he signaled to his driver, and without another word, climbed back into the waiting sedan. The car sped off, leaving behind a stunned silence, broken only by the sound of its tires screeching around the corner. The crowd slowly began to disperse, murmuring in hushed tones, still processing what had just unfolded. Chief Carter exhaled quietly, finally allowing himself a moment of relief. But Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that Lawson had let them walk away, not because he was intimidated, but because he was planning something far worse. And whatever was coming, they weren't ready for it. The next few days were eerily quiet. Officer Hayes couldn't shake the uneasy feeling left by Lawson's sudden retreat. It was too clean, too calculated. He spent every shift on edge, watching the streets with sharpened vigilance, expecting the worst. Chief Carter remained focused, continuing their patrols and outreach efforts as if nothing had happened, though Hayes could sense the same tension simmering beneath his composed exterior. One evening, just past midnight, a call came through Hayes' radio, a reported break-in at the community center where they'd met Jordan. Hayes' stomach twisted. He and Chief Carter were already on patrol nearby and arrived within minutes. The center's front door hung ajar, its lock shattered, the dim interior swallowed in darkness. Drawing their flashlights, they entered cautiously. The air inside was thick with stillness, broken only by the distant creak of floorboards. Tables were overturned, papers scattered across the floor. Clear signs of a forced search. "Stay sharp," Chief Carter whispered, his voice low but steady. As they moved deeper into the building, Hayes' mind raced. This wasn't a random break-in. It felt too deliberate. The thought of Lawson crossed his mind again. Was this retaliation, or something more sinister? Suddenly, a faint rustling echoed from the back storage room. They exchanged a brief glance before moving in formation toward the source, weapons drawn but held low. Reaching the door, Chief Carter counted silently. 3, 2, 1, before pushing it open with a swift kick. To their shock, inside the cluttered storage room sat Jordan, his knees pulled to his chest, eyes wide with fear. He was unharmed but visibly shaken. Hayes lowered his weapon instantly, relief washing over him. "Jordan, what are you doing here?" Hayes asked, rushing to the boy's side. Jordan hesitated, his small hands trembling. They were looking for something," he whispered. "I heard them talking. About my dad." Chief Carter crouched down, his expression grim but calm. "Who, Jordan?" "Who was here?" Before the boy could answer, the distant sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the empty halls, heavy, deliberate, and closing it fast. Hayes' breath caught. Someone was still here. Without a word, Chief Carter guided Jordan behind a stack of crates, signaling Hayes to take cover. They waited in tense silence as the footsteps drew closer, pausing just outside the storage room door. A long, agonizing moment passed. Then the door burst open. Two men, both armed, swept into the room with practiced precision. Their faces were partially obscured by dark caps, but Hayes recognized one of them from police surveillance photos. A known enforcer working for Lawson. Before they could react, Chief Carter sprang from his cover, disarming one man with a swift, practiced maneuver while Hayes drew his weapon, ordering the second to freeze. The room exploded into chaos as the men resisted, grappling fiercely in the confined space. In the midst of the struggle, Hayes managed to restrain one of the attackers, locking him in handcuffs while Chief Carter subdued the other. Both men were breathing heavily but victorious. "Who sent you?" Chief Carter demanded, his voice cutting through the air like steel. The restrained enforcer sneered, blood dripping from a split lip. "You already know," he spat. "Lawson doesn't forget." Before he could say more, a distant wail of sirens pierced the night as backup units approached. Hayes secured both suspects, still reeling from the intensity of the encounter. But something didn't sit right. This ambush felt too reckless, too desperate. As the police secured the scene, Hayes noticed Jordan clutching something small and metallic in his hand, partially hidden beneath his jacket. Kneeling down gently, he asked, "What's that, buddy?" Reluctantly, Jordan opened his hand, revealing a flash drive. Old, battered, but clearly important. "My dad. He told me to hide it," Jordan whispered. "Said if something ever happened, it would keep us safe." Chief Carter's face darkened with understanding. It all clicked. The break-in, the ambush, even Lawson's cryptic threats. This wasn't about control or revenge. It was about Asterisk's secrets, Asterisk. Before Hayes could process the revelation, his phone buzzed with an incoming alert. A priority warrant just issued for Dante Lawson's arrest. But the details sent a chill down his spine. Conspiracy, racketeering, and police corruption at the highest level. Chief Carter met Hayes' stunned gaze, realization dawning between them. Lawson hadn't been targeting the community center for intimidation. He had been searching for Asterisk evidence, Asterisk. Evidence that could expose his entire criminal empire and potentially implicate dirty cops within their own department. As the sirens faded into the distance, Hayes knew their fight was far from over. They had the flash drive, but how deep did this conspiracy run? And who else would come looking for it? In that charged, silent moment, he understood that their greatest battle had only just begun. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of tense meetings, secretive investigations, and mounting pressure. Chief Carter and Officer Hayes turned over the flash drive to the police department's internal affairs unit, bypassing the usual chain of command to avoid any leaks. The contents were damning, detailed records of bribes, illegal transactions, and incriminating communications tying Dante Lawson to a web of corrupt officials, including several ranking officers within their own department. For Hayes, the reality was hard to swallow. He'd always suspected some level of corruption existed. But seeing familiar names listed among the accused hit differently. These were people he'd worked alongside, trusted, even looked up to. It made him question everything he thought he knew about being a cop. Chief Carter, however, remained steady, as if he'd been preparing for this battle his entire career. He took charge of coordinating with federal agents, ensuring that no one compromised the investigation. With the evidence secured, the task force moved swiftly, launching a series of late-night raids across the city. Hayes rode alongside Chief Carter during one of the key operations targeting a high-end downtown office building where Lawson was rumored to be hiding. The mood inside the police convoy was tense but determined. This was their shot to end it for good. When they reached the building, the tactical team moved with precision, breaching the front entrance with practiced efficiency. Hayes and Chief Carter stayed close to the lead officers, sweeping each floor methodically. Empty offices, Abandoned desks and dark hallways greeted them at every turn, as if the place had been cleared in advance. Then, just as they reached the top floor, they heard muffled voices coming from a dimly lit conference room. Guns drawn, they approached cautiously. Chief Carter signaled Hayes to take the right flank while he covered the entrance. On his silent count, they burst through the door. Inside, they found Dante Lawson sitting alone at the head of a long conference table, his hands calmly resting on the polished surface. His usual entourage was nowhere to be seen. Behind him, the city skyline stretched endlessly, framed by massive floor-to-ceiling windows. "Well, if it isn't my favorite lawman," Lawson drawled, his signature smirk firmly in place. "I was wondering when you'd show up. Hands where we can see them." Hayes barked, his weapon steady. Lawson complied slowly, still oozing confidence. "Relax, officer. You already won. Or at least, you think you did." Chief Carter stepped forward, his voice cold and commanding. "It's over, Lawson. The evidence we have ties you to everything. Bribery, racketeering, attempted murder. There's no deal coming this time." But Lawson only chuckled softly. "You think I'm the one pulling the strings. You think bringing me in changes asterisk anything asterisk." His eyes gleamed with something dangerous, almost triumphant. "Go ahead. Arrest me. But you'll see, the game's far from over." For a fleeting moment, Hayes felt a chill run down his spine. Lawson's words weren't just empty bravado. They felt like a calculated prediction, a promise of more chaos to come. But there was no time to dwell on it. Backup arrived moments later, and Lawson was taken into custody without further resistance. The sight of him being led away in handcuffs brought a measure of relief, but left a lingering sense of unfinished business. In the following weeks, the fallout from the investigation rocked the entire city. Multiple high-ranking officials were arrested, exposing a deep-rooted corruption network that had operated for years. The public response was explosive. Protests, demands for reform, and calls for accountability swept through the streets. Despite the chaos, Hayes found himself feeling something he hadn't expected: hope. For the first time, it felt like real change was possible. Not because the system was perfect, but because people were finally fighting to make it better. One quiet evening after a long shift, Hayes stopped by the community center. The repairs from the earlier break-in were nearly complete, and kids were back playing basketball on the freshly painted court. He spotted Jordan sitting on the steps, this time laughing with friends, a sight that made Hayes' chest tighten with something like pride. Jordan noticed him and ran over, flashing a bright, genuine smile. "Officer Hayes? Did you catch the bad guys?" Hayes knelt to meet his gaze. "We did," he said firmly, "but there's still a lot of work to do." Jordan nodded thoughtfully, his expression serious beyond his years. "You won't quit, right?" "Never," Hayes promised, meaning it more than ever. As he walked back to his patrol car, he saw Chief Carter waiting by the driver's side, watching the bustling neighborhood with quiet satisfaction. "We did good today," Carter said simply, his voice steady but tinged with wariness. Hayes nodded. "Yeah, but there's still more to fix." Chief Carter smiled faintly, resting a hand on Hayes' shoulder. "That's the job." And with that, they climbed into the patrol car, ready for whatever came next. The city still had its shadows, its struggles, its relentless challenges. But for the first time in a long time, Hayes believed they could make a difference. Not by being heroes, but by being better. And as the car pulled away, the city lights stretched endlessly ahead. A reminder that while justice might be a long, winding road, it was a road worth walking, one step at a time.